Hello, hello, and welcome to Heartfulness Wellness webinar series. Today's episode is dedicated to the World Humanitarian Day, which is celebrated every year on August 19th. This day is for honoring humanitarian aid workers worldwide and for supporting people living in so many crisis situations. Humanitarian aid workers provide life-saving assistance to people who are caught up in disasters and conflict situations. And to be honest, words of appreciation are really not enough to acknowledge the commitment, the compassion, the courage that these people show in such challenging situations. Our heartfelt gratitude to all those people who work on the front lines, and our solidarity for people who go through such challenging times. Our gratitude also to those doctors, nurses, and health professionals on the front lines in the COVID-19 pandemic. We draw inspiration and hope from you and offer you our heartfelt salutations. I'm Vanmala Hiranandani, and I teach global health and nutrition at University College Copenhagen in Denmark. And today we have a very distinguished and I should say a very special guest with us. I say special because she has really, for me, she epitomizes compassion, which is the theme for today. Her name is Charlotte Dufour. And Charlotte, you have worked in humanitarian action as soon as you graduated from university in 2000 at the young age of 22 years. You worked with Action Against Hunger in Afghanistan during the Taliban regime and also in Somali region of Ethiopia from 2000 to 2002 on emergency nutrition programs and nutritional surveys. You worked on research, evaluation, and training on humanitarian action and the links between relief and development with the group URD, which stands for Emergency Rehabilitation Development from 2002 to 2005, with most fieldwork in Afghanistan. There, you were part of a team that developed a quality assurance method for humanitarian action called Quality Compass, and you prepared a handbook on participatory approaches in crisis situations. You returned to Afghanistan with the UN Food and Agricultural Organization from 2005 to 2008, supporting the reconstruction of the Ministry of Agriculture, focusing on the links between agricultural policies and programs and human nutrition, and continued going back there as a consultant with several organizations working in health and agriculture until early 2010. Between 2010 and 2017, you were based in the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization's headquarters, supporting country teams in mainstreaming nutrition in agricultural policies and programs. Though you were no longer directly involved in emergency interventions on the ground, you regularly worked with FAO's emergency unit, in particular the design of nutrition-sensitive resilience-building programs in the Sahel and Horn of Africa. Today, you're no longer directly supporting humanitarian operations, but are still involved as a board member of the group URD. And with friends, you're creating a small organization called Listening Inspires, which aims to support change makers, including humanitarian workers. Part of the activities will include organizing workshops on personal resilience and cultivating inner joy, even in very difficult circumstances. What an impressive background you come from, Charlotte. Very, very warm welcome to you. How are you today?
Thank you very much, Vanmala. And I'm very honored, very touched for your invitation to be with you today. Very humbled because I'm no longer there on the front lines. So my heart is very much with all those who are today in all these places of the world, whether it be Lebanon, Yemen, or many other places where there's still very acute crises. So thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Mhm.
We are very happy for that you could have the time to be with us. So tell me, how did you choose to engage with this path of humanitarian action? What made you do it?
Well, I tend to say I kind of fell in the arena of international cooperation as a child. My father was working with the World Bank, which brought us to Africa when I was 6 to 9 years old. My parents and also my grandparents were always involved in some kind of charity work. So it was part of our family DNA in a way. Still today, though they're past retirement age, they're still active. And my mom's, for example, the president of an NGO that supports thousands of children living in the slums in Cambodia. And I was very blessed that our family also grew with the adoption of my little brother Jose from Peru and my little sister Priya from India. So very young, I became very aware of how fortunate I was, and it became obvious to me that, you know, if you have received so much from life, the natural thing is to try to share some of what you've been given. And but at the same time, I could have done that in many ways. You know, you can just help people in your own country down the street. There's always need for support everywhere. So there was definitely the desire for adventure. I used to say I was born too late to be Karen Blixen. I loved Out of Africa, and I was like, the whole world has already been discovered. So it, you know, there is this kind of new frontier. And my first mission was with Afghanistan during the Taliban time. The country was very remote. So there was a big sense of adventure and privilege of being in a place where very few foreigners could be. And also the desire to prove oneself, you know, to be, can I do it? And that's also why I had accepted that second mission. It was actually just a 3-4 month mission in Somali region, but in a very challenging place. And in fact, I didn't last more than 4 months because it was too challenging. That's where I learned that it's important to also tailor the challenges to what you can cope with. And that's why I returned to Afghanistan many years. It became my second home. I really loved working there. And so that's where most of my experience has been. Yeah.
Mm. And I can understand that, you know, working and living in these situations can be so challenging, so difficult. It's not easy. It's not for everyone. Are there situations that stand out for you even today in your mind?
Um, oh, there's many. It's such a, you know, such rich and dense experiences. It's true. One feature of these crisis situations is, unfortunately, in many cases, the exposure to security risks. No, I personally had a few close calls, you know, a bomb going off in the garden of a house where you're staying, or by chance delaying a little bit a visit to a hotel, which was the victim of a huge suicide attack in Kabul, exactly at the time I was supposed to be there. And the friends, you know, or acquaintances that you know that are at the wrong place at the wrong time, you know, be it in a suicide attack or a kidnapping. Or just last week, six French aid workers and 2 of their Nigerian colleagues were killed in Niger, not far from Niamey. They were in their mid-20s, early 30s, and bright, generous, young, that these lives are taken so soon when they just wanted to help. And of course, most aid workers that are victims of security attacks are the national colleagues. We speak more of those who are there as an international status, but actually those at greatest risk are the national colleagues who are not heard of often. And one of my friends on Facebook, you know, wrote the other day after this incident, after she's been working 30 years in such situations, and she says, I'm going to leave aid work. You know, it's too much sadness, too many assassinated friends, too many tears, too much. And that felt familiar after in 2010 when I finally decided that my time in Afghanistan was over, is because I could count on the fingers of more than one hand the people I knew who had been killed. And so, but on the other hand, you know, ironically, when you're there in those situations, you don't necessarily feel the insecurity anymore. It's just, you know, you just get used to a bomb going off in the distance, or it's when you get out, when I got out actually, that I started realizing it had affected me. You know, you jump when there's a slammed door, or you just react as if there's landmines in the middle of a sidewalk in Paris, which there are not. But you realize that you're integrating that. But the hardest points are when you're exposed to suffering and you feel that what you can bring is just a little band-aid on a huge wound. Or, you know, the hardest times for me when I was measuring malnourished children in surveys, and in places where we didn't have the nutrition rehabilitation centers operational, to measure a child that's, you know, its life is at risk. There was one pair of twins, actually they were twins, but the eldest twin, or one of the twins, had died the day before we came in that house. You measure the child and you're like, what do I do now? I have another 90 kids to measure today, 90 households. So you just walk out, and that's hard. And I've had friends who were in situations where there was so much attendance, so many malnourished people in the Great Lakes region of Africa. And at some point, some acute crises, that you have to start deciding who do you let in and who do you not. Or in Ebola, you know, those who were on the front line of Ebola were incredibly distraught. So these things do stand out. But of course, if we do it, if all those wonderful people, you know, keep on fighting, is it also because what stands out are the moments where you see a child that was malnourished recover, and you feel that your presence matters. It's a beautiful commitment, I think, and very rewarding experiences in many ways.
Yeah. And that makes me think, when we were discussing the title for this encounter that we're having today, you suggested the art of compassion. And that really struck a chord with me, compassion. But I'm also very curious why you chose it to call the art.
Yeah. It's not easy, you know, because compassion is at the heart of humanitarianism. It's born from the desire to help, and it's nourished by compassion for others' suffering. We feel others' suffering, and we can't stand without doing anything. So, but in doing so, you of course expose yourself to suffering, and that can be sometimes very overwhelming and destructive. So it's also very important to have compassion for oneself. So that you can feel others' pain without being overwhelmed or even destroyed by it. And that's where the art lies. You know, sometimes the pain is so hard, it's just so easier to just close your eyes and close your heart so you don't feel. But if you don't do it with an open heart, is this humanitarianism, or is this just a technocratic gesture? So how do we keep on doing this work with an open heart? And yeah, I think that's where the art lies, and it's a path. It's a difficult path. I admire hugely my friends who I chose at one point that I had to find other ways of helping. I'm more like not in the front line, in the back line, and that's why also with Listening Inspires today, I hope that to help people who are challenged by this, to work, you know, I've learned a lot from yoga, meditation, and I hope that can help. It helped me, but I have huge admiration for all of those who are still in the front line and keep going, often with a lot of energy and enthusiasm.
True. And I keep wondering, how does one cope in such situations? How do people really, you know, go on, like you say, day after day, and in such challenging situations? How do people cope? How did you cope sometimes?
I think the answer, of course, is different for each person. And it's actually very important. I often say this to young people who want to go and help. I'm like, make sure you have selfish motives. Nobody's asking you to go there to be saved by you, you know. Be very clear about your motives and have a very healthy dose of selfish motivation, you know, whether it's the thirst for adventure or the desire to see new places or a certain fulfillment. So that's an important part. And of course, then when you're there and if you feel things you're doing are somehow worthwhile, that it does make a difference. And, you know, sometimes you might get a thank you from the people, you know, you're a mother in a feeding center. I remember one day we had hundreds of mothers coming to the feeding centers that Action Against Hunger was managing in Afghanistan. And one day, one of the mothers said, "Thank you very much. The food you're giving our children is really helping us." And I was like, "Oh, that feels so nice," because actually you don't hear it that often. Most important for me was really the quality of the relationships that are nurtured with one's colleagues. Like, that's why I went so many years in Afghanistan. Afghan people they're so wonderful. A lot of sense of humor, hard work, so committed, and humble at the same. I mean, it's very diverse, and I loved working with my Afghan colleagues and friends. I loved the interactions with the communities, what we would go to and visit. That's always a lot of fun and very rich. But also the other international staff you meet, because you meet very interesting people. But then nurturing those relationships and keeping an open heart that's something I've had to learn the hard way. And I think it's important to be confronted. And for me, the hardest moment of I would say my life, probably, is when I was 23, I was in the Somali region of Ethiopia. We were doing nutrition surveillance, but we didn't have the funds to run the nutrition treatment programs. So we're just keeping an eye on the situation, but not doing anything. And one day I was visiting the hospital of Kibri Dehar, which was, you know, hardly had any services in place at all at the time. And two of my Somali colleagues called me from the room where they were measuring children. And they're like, "Charlotte, can you come? We need your help." And there was a young child there in his mother's arms. And he was so thin that, you know, we measure their arm circumference. And the graduation starts at 7 centimeters. And if it's under 11, it's severe acute malnutrition. So you figured 7, you know. It was below 7. So they were like, we can't take the measurement properly. And of course, that was not really that important. And the question was what to do. When we had no treatment running, the hospital was barely running 2 hours a day, and there was really nothing there. And I asked the mother a few questions. I think they were living in a refugee camp. Most of their family members had died. And I didn't know what to do. And so we let them go home. And it was so hard. And later I went back to the office, and my colleagues told me, we called you because you thought you could do something. And that was just so hard. I felt so impotent and so guilty. I think what helped me keep it together is I had this very strange, almost a bit mystical experience as I was there watching this child. I felt in my heart as if the child was telling me, "It's not your fault." You see, I still have the emotions, even though this was 20 years ago. And
I understand.
That helped me so much, this forgiveness of the child. But I can tell you, and you can hear it in my voice, have I forgiven myself yet? And I went back to Europe, and with a smile, and it was a big adventure, and I learned so much. But I was really not well, and then a friend of mine who luckily had a close friend who had been in aid work for longer told me, Charlotte, you've been through tougher things than you're letting yourself acknowledge. And that happens a lot with aid workers, downplaying what we're exposed to. And so I sought therapy. But what really helped me was going to the priest of my parents' parish, because he's a wonderful, wonderful man. And I went very outraged. What's all this stuff about, saving the world? And who the hell do we think we are? We're playing God. And where's humility? The Bible talks about humility, but isn't it so arrogant to want to talk about saving people? Who the hell do we think we are? And Jesus, was he humble, calling himself the savior of the world and child of God? And where's humility in that? So I was really quite upset. And he smiled, of course, at this a kid really. And he told me, Charlotte, do you know what the origin of the word humility? And I was like, no, I don't. And he said, it's humus, it's the earth, it's the ground. Humility comes from being grounded. And he went on to tell me the important things is the quality of presence. It's how you engage your presence. He told me, I know a lot of people engage in charity work and then they're involved in petty conflicts and display mean behavior. And he's like, no, what counts is the quality of presence. And that resonated. Because actually in Afghanistan brought back memories when I was in Afghanistan in 2000 and in December 2000 we were still Taliban regime, and so there were very, very few international aid workers in the country, maybe 200-300, and we had to evacuate at some point because there were sanctions voted against the Taliban in the UN, and we feared retaliation against internationals. So we left. And I happened to be one of the last ones to leave in Jalalabad, where I was at the time. And I realized that from the anguish in my Afghan colleagues' eyes, and that they were so nervous that are leaving, that whenever we had to evacuate, and I realized it's the fact we're there which counts as much, if not even more, than the food we give or the water wells we help dig. And somebody's there to say, we care, you're not forgotten. And I think that's a really important aspect of the humanitarian action. Absolutely. Is the presence.
Absolutely. And just as a side note, I think these kinds of intangible, what should we say, intangible, something like presence, something like the quality of care, or just being there, which cannot be seen. They mean so much that sometimes then they go unrecorded in the kind of humanitarian work that people do. They're not acknowledged. Yeah. Neither do funders acknowledge, nor do, unfortunately, not the humanitarian aid workers or people who are supervising them. It's not acknowledged. And I'm so glad that you bring this up, because this is so pertinent from the people on the ground, people on the receiving end, people who are struggling.
And I think that's also why another big challenge for aid workers is that now aid has become so technocratic. There's just so much bureaucracy to be able to receive funds, so much reporting, even with the best of intentions, with accountability and all of that. It's just, which comes from a desire to show that we're providing quality support, because it's since about 25 years now, it's clear, even more, it's clear that just doing help is not enough. You have to provide help that is relevant, that is of good quality. So there's been a lot to do to improve the quality of aid, and a lot to do to improve accountability of aid organizations, which is really positive. But the downside to that is a certain rigidification of the system, and the fact that people on the ground, are leaving there to go and help and have these beautiful encounters I mentioned before. But then you're sitting in front of a computer filing reports, and that's also where there's also a big challenge and burnout, because the disconnect between what you want to do, what you see the needs are, and the fact that you're there having to handle big bureaucracy is really not easy.
I'm actually so grateful that you brought out your personal experience here too, and you've been saying that yoga is an important part of your life. I was just wondering how this practice of yoga has influenced you, and how do you see this approach connected to humanitarian action?
It's helped me in many ways, because, well, first of all, from a purely physical level, breathing and not being stressed. And even in Kabul, I used to do my 10 minutes of sun salutations every morning, etc. And then, so even just the physical practice has helped me a lot. But what has been an absolute discovery for me in the science of yoga is karma yoga. It's trying to achieve union, to achieve inner bliss through service to others and acting without attachment to the results, and knowing that what counts is the intention. So you may not be able to make the difference that you want to make, but your intention is good, your heart is open, and also acting as a channel for something greater than yourself. I think as an aid worker, I used to, and I think many of us do, tend to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. You know, it's like, which actually I found is very quite egoic. You know, like it's ego-centered. You know, like, oh, I'm the one who has to solve this. And there you just let go. It's like, no, this is something bigger than myself, and I just try to be available, and I meditate and ask to be guided, and I am carried rather than trying to carry the weight on the world. I guess it's also led me to be a little bit more humble. You know, I'm not expected to ever save every malnourished child on the planet. And accept that, also accept to be joyful. You know, that notion of guilt that I've expressed, it took me a long time to also accept that it was okay for me to come back home and live a very comfortable life when I knew that so many of my friends were living in very challenging circumstances. So accepting that it's okay to be happy, even when others are suffering. And that doesn't mean not feeling compassion. It's dealing with the guilt. A friend of mine from Ananda, and the Ananda community I go to in Assisi, once said, guilt is the voice of the conscience, but it's also a trap of the ego. And in that, it traps energy. You know, guilt brings you down, it closes your heart, you lose your energy. So no, you can't afford to waste that energy. You have to invest it into an outward flow. And it's all logical, coherent, because service is at the heart of yoga. I was once in a retreat in Rishikesh, and we visited this Swami Vanamali in her ashram, and I asked her, when do we know it's right to help others, that we're not interfering, for example, in their own lessons that they have to learn? And she, because that's one thing, sorry, a little sidetrack, that's one thing that also helped me, this notion that the challenges we face are an opportunity for us to grow. So you don't want to avoid those challenges, and you don't want to have others avoid it either. They have to grow. But she told me, the way you're asking this question reveals you consider yourself as separate from the other. But you know through yoga that that is not true. We are all one. So if the other is you, how can you not do everything in your power to help them? So that's a tall order. Again, wow, okay, quite intimidating. I've reflected a lot, because in that trip, my yoga, I had asked for a spiritual name to guide me in my own growth. And my yoga teacher, Jayadev, meditated on it for many months. And in Rishikesh, the next day, actually, this encounter gave me the name of Karuna Devi. So goddess of compassion. And I was like, oh, how can I carry this name without being a total fraud? You know, it's a tall order. But again, it's through the yoga practice that I'm learning, breathing, and really keeping an open heart, accepting that in this duality of this world, suffering is there, not as a fatality. It's not to be resigned, you know, it's not an invitation for resignation, but it's really these challenges as an opportunity to grow towards more inner peace and wisdom and opening the heart. So that's really what I learned. Yeah.
This reminds me of a poem. I'm sure you've heard about it. I don't remember the exact title, but it goes like this. It's a short prayer, actually. Give me the courage to change the things that I can, the forbearance to accept that which I cannot change, and the wisdom to know the difference. Yeah. And to me, that's the key, the wisdom to know what we can change and what we can't change. And the second thing that comes to mind when you just listening to you, Charlotte, is also that we need to let go of our smaller self, of the me, the ego, the little I, and to make way for the big self, for the higher self. And that is yoga. That is union. Yoga meaning union. That is the crux of the art of yoga and the art of compassion. So how very nice that you bring all this together, compassion and yoga. To
Yeah.
conclude, what would you like to tell our young professionals, students, or anyone who wants to engage in humanitarian work?
Oh, thank you. I'd say engage in this work with an open heart, grounded in yourself, and allowing yourself to be guided by something greater than yourself. Nurture the relationships with the people with needs. You will meet. Don't go out there with the intention to save, but to listen, to learn, to love. I think we really need to move away from this relationship of savior beneficiary. It's really one where we learn together. We walk side by side with compassion for each other. So you will receive probably more than you give. And let yourself be surprised. To take care of yourself. Don't overdo it. But don't hide from the pain, because it's by feeling the pain that you also allow yourself to feel the joy, and seek the beauty. That's been the most amazing lesson for me, is that even in the darkest context, there is always a spark of light. There is always beauty. I remember we did a nutritional survey in Kandahar in the middle of Taliban time, and we were very afraid because we were so close to the heart of the Taliban country. And we went into this house, and there the women were wearing beautiful clothes, and there was a wedding under preparation. And we started dancing. You know, they took out the tambourines, and we were there, and we were not allowed to play music. Women are supposed to be under the burqa, and all of these preconceptions I had. And then we had a party in the middle of our nutrition survey. There's so many of those beautiful moments that are made all the more beautiful because the wider context is dark. So I think whatever you try to do, try to act from a space of love and joy, and you will receive a lot.
And I think it's also okay to share the pain, to talk about the pain,
Yes.
to vent sometimes, and to
Yeah.
cry sometimes. It's okay. I've had students caught up in some of these difficult situations, also nurses, including psychiatric nurses who have seen, patients with trauma. And they come to the class, and there was this class on resilience, and they were just crying. What do we do? And my answer was, it is okay. You can't solve the world's problem, and it's okay for you to cry. It's also okay for you and the patient to cry together. That's also okay. So giving ourselves that space. And I was so struck with what you said earlier, Charlotte, about meditation. And my students also have learned and benefited a lot from meditation. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the kind of meditation that you do, and if we could conclude this episode with a short meditation guided by you. That would be really fantastic.
Thank you very much. I'd love to do that. And well, the meditation I practice is a Hong So. It's a meditation that was taught by Paramhansa Yogananda. And I love the mantra means I am spirit. Hong is close to the Sanskrit aham saha. I am spirit. And it's an invitation to really see ourselves as the qualities of the soul, which are love, joy, peace, calm, wisdom, power, light, and sound. And so to come back to ourselves. And that has really helped me, this notion that I am spirit, and spirit lives and breathes through me. And if I allow spirit to act through me, then I'm probably doing something okay. So I would be very happy to invite you to a very short visualization. I just take a sip. So please stand up straight with a back nice and long, shoulders relaxed. You can take a double in-breath, tensing all your muscles to really tense lip like this, and then with double out-breath through the mouth, you relax everything again. Double in-breath, tense, and relax. Close your eyes, and we're going to start by taking a few triangular breaths, Breathing in, holding, and breathing out on equal counts to relax and become very present in our body and our breath. So breathe out and breathe in through the nose. Hold your breath. Breathe out. Breathe in. Hold the breath. Breathe out. Breathe in. Hold the breath. Breathe out. Do 2 more full breaths in your own time. The breath might lengthen a bit as you relax, keeping equal counts between the in-breath, holding, and out-breath. And now let go of controlling the breath and just watch it flow. Feel the breath flowing in your lungs. You might feel the rise and fall of your chest. You might feel it in your nostrils. It's effortless. Feel life is breathing through you, and you just observe. And as you breathe in, you can feel or hear mentally the mantra Hong. And as you breathe out, Saw. On the in-breath, Hong. And out-breath, Saw. I am spirit. And as your breath becomes lighter and lighter, you can observe it more higher in your nasal pathway. Observing the flow in the highest point, which is almost in the point between your eyebrows. The center, very close to the spiritual eye. Still feeling the echo of Hong and Saw. Feeling the peace of spirit flow through you. Feeling the love of spirit flow through you. Feeling the light. As your thoughts may come back, just come back to your breath, feeling the Hong and the Saw, pace, the flow of your breath. And now let go of the mantra and just gaze up behind your closed eyes, focusing in your third eye, the spiritual eye. And you can imagine a light shining there. And feel this light, shining light into your heart. It brings with it peace, comfort, and help feel how your heart is expanding as the light floods into it. Embrace the light. And as you feel the light radiating in and through your heart, invite this light to go touch the heart of all those affected by crisis, by war, by migration, by the loss of their livelihoods, all those in pain, all those who are suffering. Feel the limitless light of your heart touching their heart, bringing them this sense of comfort. Channeling this infinite flow of love to all those in need. And now feel the rays of light spreading from your heart to all the hearts of the aid workers, the health staff, the community workers, the agricultural extensionists, the water engineers, the translators, the drivers, the radio operators, all those who make aid programs possible. Shine the light, reaching their hearts, sending them our support, our love. And you can visualize our whole planet with a web of light, hearts connected, creating a beautiful halo, a beautiful glow that shines back into your heart and gives you joy. Feel yourself full. Feel the fullness of your heart. And keeping this fullness with you, feeling the beauty and power of compassion, come back to your breath. And maybe to conclude, we can all shine light onto all the aid workers and all the people in need of support by rubbing our hands together. You can bring lots of energy in the palms of your hands. And then open up your arms. With your closed eyes, we can chant 3 Oms. Om is the vibration of creation. And to visualize the streams of light shining out onto all those in need of support and compassion. Om. Om. Oh, Shanti. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Have a beautiful day.